Perfect. I'm excited.
The badge is showing up on Zoom, but
Oh, there you go.
okay, we are live on YouTube. Let me switch back to our slides. Make sure we are recording locally so that people have a recording to look at after, in case.
Perfect.
Though I find with YouTube, let me actually share the YouTube link to people who want to watch on YouTube, prefer the YouTube viewing experience. The YouTube link is in the chat as well. Let's record locally and get started. So welcome everyone to this webinar about how banks can use automation to increase marketing ROI. Now, if you guys are regulars of TAR's webinars, you'll know that we've hosted many webinars of this type focused on different industries, and it felt like the natural next progression was to focus on banking, because so many of our customers at TARS work in banking, work in financial services, and they've been seeing an immense amount of value from the from our product through the automation features in our product, which, as you'll see, are quite significant to the product going forward. We're excited today to be joined by the folks over at Act On, specifically Andy. We'll get into intros in just a second. As always, we like to start our webinars with intros. Also, I apologize in advance if I seem a little off today. I'm still recovering from my second COVID shot, so everything feel a little bit discombobulated, so bear with me. Now, as I mentioned, this webinar is co-hosted by TARS and Acton. At TARS, we've been helping businesses digitize and automate processes, boost conversions, and troubleshoot queries automatically since 2016. Now, this is our elevator pitch of a description of who we are. The real story is actually a little bit more it's a little bit more complex, I'd say. When we started off, we started off with a simple mission of improving the way businesses and customers interact with each other, because we ourselves were tired of clunky, unengaging online experiences when we were interacting with businesses. And when we asked ourselves what the best way to solve this problem was, and the solution we settled on was conversations. We figured that if we could enable businesses to have more conversations with their customers, it could improve the overall experience for the customer. And the way the tool we use to do that is primarily chatbots. Now, at the time, we weren't really thinking of ourselves as a chatbot company. We just thought of ourselves as a customer experience company. But as the chatbot industry grew around us, we sort of adopted the term because that's what everyone was using and that's what everyone was familiar with. But at our core, we are still driven by that underlying mission, and that is, at least at TARS, that's how we view ourselves. We view ourselves in the context of that mission and how we can fulfill that mission. As I just mentioned, we are joined today by the folks over at Acton. And rather than butcher their intro, I'm going to hand it over to Andy from the Acton team to tell us a little bit about what they are up to in the world of customer experience.
Sorry about the description here. I think it got overwritten here, but yeah, Acton, we are a all-in-one marketing automation solution. Basically what we want to do is help companies, use automation to enhance the prospect and customer experience from the top to the bottom of the funnel. Basically, in terms, whether it's lead generation, whether it's nurturing leads and prospects, whether it's onboarding or developing engagement with your customers. Marketing automation has an incredibly powerful role to play in all of those things. And Acton is a platform that will help you do it. So that's us.
Awesome. Yeah, I just noticed as well that the description over here didn't get changed, but that's fine. Maybe we can fix it in post for the people who are watching the recording.
When in doubt, fix it in post.
Yeah, I'm going to note it down, send it to my team on Slack. In terms of who we are specifically as your hosts, if you've attended the TARS webinars before, you will be familiar with who I am. I'm the regular host on these webinars. My name is Arnav. I'm a content marketer at TARS, and essentially what my job consists of is creating content just like this to help you guys get more out of your customer experience, more out of your marketing campaigns, more out of your customer support operations. And like I said on the previous slide, maybe we should swap these slides around in future webinars. I'm joined by Andy Rice, the Director of Demand Generation from Acton. Welcome,
Yeah.
Andy.
And I am the director of demand gen here, and I've been doing, demand gen in one capacity or another for a decade now. And yeah, this is obviously it's a passion of mine. All about trying to deliver the most ROI for a company using, marketing strategies, whatever suits the company that I'm working for. So yeah, I love demand gen, I love marketing, and yeah, I'm just excited to talk through this stuff today.
Awesome. Now, usually in these webinars, what we try to do is we try to give you a table of contents to tell you guys what you can expect over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour. But I think a better starting point for this webinar is this diagram over here, because this is going to be what we focus all our content around in this webinar. This, at a broad sense, if you abstract to a high enough degree, this is the buyer journey for pretty much any customer, not only in banking but across industries. I'd say a lot of these stages are the same. And what we are talking about today is how you can use automation to get more people from the awareness stage of this buyer journey all the way down to the advocacy stage of this buyer journey.
I think it's really important. I love this diagram so much because, I feel like with a lot of marketers, the common conception is that, the funnel, everybody's very focused on the funnel, which is kind of the top half of this diagram. And I think a lot of marketers are sort of myopically focused on the top of the funnel, to the detriment of sort of the rest. Marketing has a role to play across the board. It's sort of the growth marketing mindset that we have, which is, that there's a ROI at all of the stages in the funnel. As you go through, the more people like your product, the more people adopt them, the more they'll share that information, which drives, of course, awareness at the top of the funnel and interest. So if you do it right, this whole thing can be a virtuous cycle. And
right.
That's really important.
And funnily enough, before we had this diagram over here, before Andy was so kind to add it to the slide, initially we were going to center this around a different diagram, which actually suffered from the exact problem that Andy just talked about. We were just talking about the top half of this funnel. But like Andy said, you can't really just focus on the top half of this funnel. You have to focus on the bottom half as well, where it widens out. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump into the actual automation tactics that we use that we're going to tell you about in this webinar, I think it's worthwhile to talk about the problem that we are trying to solve. So we just said that we're using automation to move people along this buyer journey, but why use automation is a question that we're going to ask ourselves in this next section, because I think that before you incorporate any new practices in the way you run your marketing operation, any new technologies in the way you run your marketing operation, you need to ask yourself what value that technology is bringing, because adoption of new technology, adoption of new practices obviously is a high friction process, and you need to have a good justification for why you are doing it to actually see some benefit out of it. And to give you some context on the problem that we are talking about, I think what we can do is take a step back and go back in time to before the pandemic, even a decade before the pandemic, when digital marketing wasn't as big of a thing, internet penetration wasn't particularly high, and we used to actually go into physical offices, shops and branches to buy things, whether that was a pair of socks or whether that was to open a checking account. Or we used to call businesses. After some time, we got to a point where we felt comfortable doing business over the phone. But what united all of these methods of selling to people and buying from companies was that, with a few exceptions, the buyer journey involved a significant amount of human interaction. Now we all know what happens next. We start to shift towards the era of digital. People get better access to internet. Everyone has a computer at home. Everyone has a smartphone in their pockets, and they feel comfortable buying things on their smartphones and on their computers. In fact, they prefer it because obviously digital buying and selling has benefits for both consumers and for consumers and businesses. For consumers, you get the sort of ultimate convenience where you can open a checking account from laying in your bed or sitting on your couch. Or you can buy pretty much anything under the sun from Amazon while, again, commuting to work on the bus. And for businesses, of course, the benefit that it provided was it gave you unfathomable reach, because actually getting people to walk into your shop, getting people to walk into your physical branches is a bigger ask than getting someone to just tap on an ad on Facebook or tap on an ad on Google and then surf it from wherever they are sitting. But the sort of unintended, I would say, byproduct of this shift is that the buyer journey shifted from being a human-centric buyer journey to being a self-serve buyer journey. So where we were talking to people before to get the buyer journey done, we were now doing things ourselves as buyers. We were filling out all our details ourselves. We were looking through the information, navigating landing pages to figure out what was important to us on our own, instead of being guided through the buyer journey. And the banking industry really has been no different in this trend. There's a tendency I find, especially in B2C services industries, banking, legal, finance, to think that we're immune from these trends, but this is not the case. Banks are increasingly reliant on digital marketing as a customer acquisition channel. I will say less so than some other industries. I mean, you obviously can't compete with e-commerce; it has E in the name. But banks are increasingly reliant on digital marketing as a customer acquisition channel. And it was estimated. This is a fun fact that I had not known before I did research for this webinar, but it was estimated that in Q3 of 2019, more checking accounts, since Q3 of 2019 actually, more checking accounts were opened online than in person, according to a report by the Cornerstone groups. And pretty much all consumer financial products can in some way be purchased online, or at least part of the buyer journey has shifted online. That option is open to people. Now,
I have to imagine that probably looks like a rocket ship going off when you get to sort of Q2 of 2020, the pandemic, right?
Yep. So I can only imagine. Actually, I do remember the graph, and it's almost, you see in branch openings of checking accounts collapse at the exact same time that online goes up. It seems to be a pretty zero-sum game between the two. Now, a lot of digital marketers, a lot of folks in business think that this is a happy ending. This is sort of the end point that we've all been working towards. Businesses get reach, customers get convenience. What's not to love about the picture? Well, it turns out there's actually quite a bit. What we're finding is that, especially for products like the products that banks are selling, it is difficult to convey value through static one-size-fits-all web pages. Most banking customers are low information. And what I mean by this is the average person who opens a checking account, the average person who opens a savings account, the average person who gets a credit card is not a financial expert themselves. So when you give them information about your products, there's a good chance that information is just going to blend in with all of the other information they're looking at on other websites from other banks, from your competitors. To add to that, to compound this issue, financial decisions, regardless of how minor they are, can be stressful for a lot of people. And there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of research from the field of social science and psychology that tell us that making decisions under stress impairs our ability to make those decisions well. And the end result of both of these factors coming together is that static pages, the pages that we're currently using to engage with people online, and try to convert them into customers and then convert them into advocates for our product, are just unconvincing customer engagement tools. They're not very effective at doing their job. And at the top of the funnel, that looks like having poor conversion rates. So regardless of what industry you look at, banking is not immune from this again. Conversion rates are extremely low when you're running things like ads, which is a real problem because you're spending cold hard money to bring people to your landing pages. And further down the funnel, it's harder to make people advocates. It's harder to retain people. It's harder to generate the sort of customer loyalty that you need to get people all the way to the end of the buyer journey that we showed you earlier. And then the other sort of factor at play over here, this is something that digital marketers talk about all the time. I feel went to a conference a couple of years ago where I can't tell you how many times I heard this trend going on. Though I'm a little bit skeptical about it. Is that digital fatigue is setting in? It's a cliche in digital marketing that attention spans are dropping and competition is increasing, and traditional landing pages as a result yield poor conversion rates. And it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why these static pages aren't working. If you think about it, the static pages that we use to engage customers traditionally, the self-serve pages, let's call them that in the context of automation, they're essentially glorified brochures. They have walls of text and forms in them, which is really just a brochure put online. We can couch it in fancy terms, say it's sort of digital customer engagement, but at the end of the day, it is just a glorified brochure without much personalization, and sort of has this one size fits all approach to engaging customers.
Yeah. Yep. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about what this means for marketers, right? Because I mean, in the end, it's all about us, really. Basically, people's expectations are changing for both how they interact with your product or how they, come to you, and also what your business expectations are for what you as a marketer would be able to do with it, right? Like buyers come in, and the expectation is that you're not like cold emailing people, that your attention is personalized, that you know who they are, you're making a meaningful connection with them, while also keeping their control, right? Like people have grown accustomed to being 100% in control of the buyer process, right? I want to say what people do 80-90% of the research before they even make it to your website. And so there are a lot of, they're in control of the buying process largely. While on the business side, everybody wants you to do more with less, right? We've got all these awesome digital tools now. We've got a lot of abilities that didn't exist for a long, long time. And so everybody's like, okay, we need more, better leads, deliver more value, cast a wider net, all these ways to grow the business. And so sometimes these, the buyer's expectations and the business expectations are kind of directly at odds, which can put marketers in kind of a tight spot, honestly.
I mean, I don't work in banking, obviously, but I can totally feel this. If our sales folks are watching this,
you get it.
Yep. I think all marketers get this. We are, after all, the center of the universe.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. And the way that continuing from what Andy said, I think the way that a lot of businesses, a lot of marketing teams have addressed these conflicting challenges that they face, that they've addressed the sort of issues that we talked about on previous slides with engaging people online and moving them along the buyer journey, is that they've sort of reverted back to what we were doing before. There's a continued reliance on human-driven customer service to move people along, because it fills a lot of the gaps that we were just talking about. Because at the end of the day, conversations are an effective way of increasing conversions. And I mean, talking on the point that the buyers want control over the buyer journey, I think that a lot of buyers want to have conversations with people rather than fill out forms. They want a personalized experience where someone is willing to give them all of the information that they need to make a decision. And this is why we're seeing call CTAs and live chats make a return to pages, if you will. I mean, take the humble live chat widget as an example. It's gone from being this software tool you hid away on the customer support page of your website, where if something went wrong, people would go there and maybe they'd start a live chat with your agents, to being front and center on your landing pages that people click onto from your Google ads or on your homepage. There's been sort of this renaissance of widgets, or I guess you can't really call it a renaissance if there weren't widgets in the first place. I guess it's not a rebirth if it wasn't born before. But live chat widgets, call CTAs have made an emergence on our home pages and on our landing pages, and that's sort of an indicator of this trend. And actually, come to think of it, when you put together what Andy said on this slide, specifically about buyers wanting to be in control, and when you think about the fact that buyers are low information, that's where conversations, it's, I think, at the intersection of those two trends that conversations come into the picture, because buyers obviously want to consume the information in a way that is understandable to them. And I would argue that the best way to do that is through a conversation with someone, as opposed to reading through a wall of text.
Yeah, it allows you to deliver a personalized experience, which is kind of, what everybody's looking for.
Exactly. So now have we reached the happy ending that we were all hoping to reach? We've sort of figured out how to address the issues that we were talking about before by just infusing a little bit of personalized customer service to the buyer journey. Well, it's close. We're close, but we're not quite there yet, because human-driven customer service is unscalable. When you're using live chat widgets, when you're using call CTAs, when you're using human agents to have these conversations with customers and to deliver this personalized as your vector for delivering personalized customer service and customer engagement to your customers, it can get expensive. Even if you are, especially if you're a larger institution, it can get expensive, because managing a support team is a bit of a HR headache. Inevitably, your request volume, if you're doing your job right as a marketer and bringing enough traffic to your pages and getting enough people to start on the buyer journey, you're inevitably going to reach a point where you have long wait times, where the number of people who want to have these conversations, who want to have the personalized customer experience, far outstrips your capacity to deliver that. And that obviously diminishes the customer experience. You're essentially, if any of you guys are familiar with meme culture, you're suffering from success. And of course, delivering customer service 24/7 is nearly impossible for most businesses, irrespective of size. Again, gets back to the expense issue. So the dilemma of banking lead gen that a lot of institutions are facing is that you're being asked to choose when you're thinking about how you can engage your customers and get people through the buyer journey. You're being asked to choose between an effective but expensive and notably disruptable. I didn't talk about this on the previous slide, but think about what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone went remote, and at least a lot of our customers came to us saying that their human-driven approaches to engaging with customers in the buyer journey collapsed for a little bit, essentially, because they didn't have the systems in place to handle the change. So you're choosing between this effective but expensive and disruptible human-based approach to personalized customer service, personalized customer engagement, and a sort of self-serve, one-size-fits-all, unengaging but cheap approach with just static landing pages and sort of these one-size-fits-all assets that you use to engage customers. So what's the solution to all of this? And that's where automation comes into the picture. That is why we are on the webinar today. I know we took a little bit of time to reach here, but I think it's worthwhile for us to all be on the same page and to sort of set the stage for what we are talking about today. So what we're talking about today is how we can move people along this buyer journey from awareness to advocacy. And for simplicity, because we have a lot of stages in this buyer journey, we're actually going to divide the buyer journey up into, broadly speaking, 3 sections and talk about how automation can figure into each of these sections. So I'll initially talk about how you can incorporate automation to deliver a personalized customer experience in the capture section. So where people are getting awareness about your product and they're indicating interest, or their interest is being nurtured in the product. Then Andy's going to talk about how you can use how you can use automation to nurture that interest into an actual purchase. And then finally, he's also going to talk about how you can use automation to deliver personalized experiences in the engage part of this buyer journey, which I often think is forgotten about by a lot of marketers, because we hand things off. We hand things off to the people further down the funnel, and then we forget about what happens next. So I personally am very excited to hear about what Andy has to say in that last part. So let's get started, because we've taken almost 20 minutes to set the stage for
an important stage. Don't worry about it.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Where we are.
I agree. Okay. So how can you use automation in the capture process in the capture stage of the buyer journey to deliver a personalized customer experience? Now, it should be no surprise after our introduction that the solution that I'm going to be talking about, the tactic that I'm going to be talking about, is chatbots. Now, what exactly a chatbot is, just so that we're all on the same page, it's an automated customer service rep that can answer questions that prospects might have about your products or services and capture lead information from a prospect. I make this mistake every single time where I forget that I have something linked on this image, and then I click on it. If you look at all our previous webinars where I've used this slide, there's almost a guarantee that I click on that link. But essentially, what a chatbot is it's an automated customer service rep that can answer questions that a prospect might have or capture lead information from a prospect. One way I like to think about this is if you imagine your online assets that you're using to engage prospects at the top of the funnel, when they click on an ad, that you're running on Facebook, when they click on an ad that you're running on Google, or even on your website, you can think about that page like your physical bank branch, and you can think about the chatbot that lives on that page as the sort of relationship manager who can walk you through any questions that you have, and help you navigate the world of financial services products and banking products. Now, where these get deployed, I already sort of gave you a heads up. Oh, we have a question over here saying, are you sending the recording after this? We are absolutely sending a recording after this webinar is done. Now, in terms of where these chatbots get deployed, there are a number of places that they can be deployed. The first is on your website as a website widget. This is sort of the classic way of deploying chatbots. And if you've interacted with the chatbot before, it's likely that you have interacted with a chatbot in the context of a widget, where there's this little pop-up in the bottom right of your screen that you can click on to initiate a conversation with the chatbot on page. The second approach, which I think is more interesting but is less popular, I'd say more of a maverick approach, if such a thing can exist in the world of digital marketing, is to use it as a conversational landing page. And what a lot of folks do in this use case is they actually just take a web-based chatbot, which has a link, which is a website, is HTML, CSS, JavaScript under the hood, and they just use that as their landing page. So they cut the middleman out altogether. Instead of when someone clicks on your Google ad, when someone clicks on your Facebook ad, instead of dropping them onto a landing page or onto your website, you just drop them straight into the conversation with the chatbot where they can complete the buyer journey. This works wonders for high intent prospects. I find when people aren't doing research about the product, when they're certain that they want to get that new credit card, when they're certain that they want to get to buy your product, this is a great approach because it cuts out the middleman of having all of this information on the page that they don't really need because they already know what they want to do, and it takes them straight to the conversation that they want to have to proceed the buyer journey. And then the third and final way that you can deploy chatbots is on WhatsApp. If WhatsApp is popular in your markets, this is a good approach to engage with customers, because you can obviously turn your top of the funnel interactions into recurring conversations that you can have as people get converted into actual customers. So someone initially maybe gets a mailer from you, maybe gets an email from you, indicate about a product they're interested in. Instead of clicking on the link to your landing page, they click on a link to your WhatsApp chatbot, which people are increasingly doing in markets where WhatsApp is popular. They have a conversation to express interest, so at the top of the funnel. Now you can also re-engage them further down in the nurture and engage parts of the funnel if they do convert, because obviously WhatsApp has persistent conversations. Once they start a conversation with you, you can revisit that conversation through WhatsApp campaigns and send them notifications to start new flows to engage them and nurture them, obviously. Now, why chatbots? Why I'm suggesting chatbots as a tactic over here, as an automation tactic in the capture stage of the buyer journey, is because, like we mentioned in the slides before when we were setting the stage for this webinar, people want to have conversations. And they are low information customers in a lot of situations where if you show them a wall of text, they're not going to be able to make as much sense of it as an expert might be able to. But having those conversations at scale through human agents is expensive. So how do you create, what tool can you use to have these conversations at scale? As one of my former colleagues used to put it, how do you create intimacy with your customers at scale? And chatbots are are an option to do this, because they sort of tread the line between the cheap self-serve approach and the engaging human-based approach to having these conversations. Because like a human-based lead gen approach, chatbots deliver the conversational experiences that customers want. So people want to have conversations, as we've already established, and chatbots give that to them. The entire interaction is structured as a conversation. But unlike those human interactions, they don't suffer from the same cost problems. They're cheap because you just need one piece of software to interact with millions of people at once. They don't need to sleep because they're pieces of software, so they are available 24/7, and they have infinite concurrence. So what I mean by that is, again, this point that they can interact with a million people at once without having to ask people to wait. Actually, a million is a huge understatement. They can essentially interact with infinite people at once, barring obviously any like technical capacity that the back end of your chatbot might have, which, let's be honest, is never going to get maxed out. And that. Oh, before I close that and before I hand it over to Andy, another advantage that we often forget with chatbots, this is sort of more of a back end advantage, is that if you think about, so I recently went and got a checking account opened, or actually, no, I didn't get a checking account opened. I actually went and got my wife added as beneficiary to my checking account. And to do the process, even though I am on the cusp of being a millennial and a Gen Zer, I still went into the bank because I had no idea what the process was like in my app. I didn't even know if it was possible in app. I think you had to go in person for it. But the process of getting getting her added as beneficiary actually involved me having a conversation with the relationship manager over there, who's very nice and walked us through the entire process. It was conversational. But a lot of it involved manual input of data into Bank of America's system, either by them or by us. They'd either hand us an iPad to fill out information, or they'd fill out the information themselves on the iPad. Now, when you have manual input, we don't think about it much, but there's scope for human error. With a chatbot, you don't have that issue because you have this conversation with the chatbot, and the chatbot, being a piece of software, can link up directly with your CRM, where it can automatically send all of that data. And if you're talking about this in the top of the funnel, Andy will obviously talk about what you can do further down in the funnel, further down in the buyer journey. But once you have all of that data automatically synced into your CRM, into your backend system, there's sort of a seamless handoff between the capture process of the buyer journey and the nurture process, because all of that there's no friction in getting that information where it needs to be to begin your campaigns to nurture people to conversion and then turn them into advocates. And I think that's a good stopping point for me to hand it off to Andy, because the point where we've left it, your chatbot's captured all of the information it needs to and sent it to your CRM, where you can start nurturing them into.
Got the data.
Sorry?
So you've got the data. That's the step one.
Right, exactly.
Data. Yeah, lots of good ways to do that. So yeah, let's talk through a little bit what what you do. once you got some folks in your system, once you've got some interest, once you've got some people that you might want to reach out to, you might want to sell to in the future. I want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so for me, it's all about personalization, right? But personalization, I think, has gotten sort of this reputation. A lot of people really focus on like, hello, first name, that and then they're like, all right, I personalized the system, I'm good to go. This is the perfect marketing program. And that's not quite it. There's a lot of things to do, and it varies a lot by by the type of business, by what you're trying to do, what you're trying to execute, what people are interested in. So basically, what my recommendation to all companies, especially banks, is to identify what the different types of buyers you have are. What messages do you find resonate with different groups? Are we talking about people who are interested in credit cards versus who are interested in mortgages? Are we talking about people who live in different areas? Are we talking about people who have different, income levels? All of these things are ways that you can sort of segment your database and pivot and customize a message just for them. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about personalization. When you're doing nurture programs, the more you can break down your sort of audience into different segments, the more you'll be able to find a message that resonates with them. If you got customers, do they buy stuff? Are they Have they logged in recently? That's like a hugely important thing that, if you're trying to figure out a different message to send to somebody, understanding whether they actually, are logging in and are looking at their funds or, what have you. Those are all super important ways that you can sort of pivot those different segments. Go to the next slide here.
Really quick on this point of personalization and making it go deeper. This is something we talk about in the context of our chatbots as well. When you're thinking about, if you're thinking about this entire process of engaging your customers as having a conversation with them at scale in an automated fashion, obviously, even in your nurture programs, when you're sending out mailers and things like that, when you're talking to actual people, like when I was talking to the relationship manager, when they see a detail about you and they see that you went to college in Maine or you have a Maine area code, they're like, oh, they sort of make small talk with you, and we take it for granted, but that's sort of that sort of degree of personalization where you're able to recognize where someone is from or what they're looking for, what their interest is, really goes a long way in nurturing customers.
Absolutely, kind of greases the skids for any future conversations and stuff like that.
Right,
exactly. Shows the level of engagement and care people might be missing elsewhere.
Especially in the context of banks, I feel like it turns banks from being these abstract corporate entities out there that give you a checking account into a business that you can actually have a relationship with, a meaningful relationship with.
Totally. Yeah. And on that note, so what you're trying to do here is you want to increase qualified leads. You want to increase the amount that they convert, and you want to increase the purchases that they make, right? So when you're nurturing folks, you need volume at the top of the funnel. If you nurture them, you can get up to 450% increase in leads, right? So that's where the volume comes from, but it doesn't make much of a difference if they're not actually converting into sales, right? So if you're not nurturing people correctly, if you're not providing them with ways to come in with valuable information, they're probably not going to convert, and that's sort of where the biggest drop off is. But on the flip side of that, customers are 80% more likely to make a purchase if they are offered a personalized experience, which is why I'm so focused on this, is because that's like the key to getting people to actually, come and spend money with your organization, is by making an experience that's tailored for them. And so I want to talk a little bit about what this looks like. Because I feel like a lot of companies they start thinking about all the different ways that they can do this. I was talking about 4 or 5 different ways to segment your database and offer personalized messages based on all those. And that can be enormously overwhelming, right? It's not a good place to start if you try to build, a complex web of segments and nurtures and personalizations right from the get-go. You're going to spend a year working on it and nothing's going to happen. So I wanted to give an example. Like it could be as easy as this. Looks like I drafted away for a second. There we go. Which is like somebody asks for information and you send them an automatic response based on what their request was, based on what page they requested it on, based on how they came in through a chatbot, for example. Like once you have that information, you can automatically respond in a way that benefits them. Even setting up that 1-2 punch is a huge step forward from like manually answering all this stuff and using people and resources to do it, right? That's like a good first step. But then once that's set up, you can sort of get more complicated with something like this. Maybe they watched a video, maybe they downloaded, this is, by the way, an example from my line of work, but I think it applies across the board, right? Maybe they looked into a checking account. Maybe they were looking at your mortgage page. Maybe they were looking at the credit card deals, right? Where they are. And then you can start divvying people up based on that, right? Maybe the automatic response that they get ties into the page that they were looking on, ties into what they were most interested in. And then if you go to the next one, you can keep this party train rolling, right? Like, who are they? Are they, in this example, are they an executive or a social media coordinator? Do they work on automation? For banks, it might look, more something like what's their income level? Are they, so you got this person looking at credit cards and they're high income, they're probably going to get a different message than somebody who's coming in, low income looking at a checking account, right? The more that you can sort of build that kind of personalized message into your nurture programs, and all this stuff can be automated based on the information that you're able to gather as you're doing all this stuff. And then let's get into engagement, right? What is it? Because I feel like a lot of marketers, as I said before, kind of just stop. They stop when they get to the middle of the funnel, I would say, when people start to convert. But here's some fun facts for you if you go to the next slide, which is that you've got a 70% success rate selling to an existing customer as opposed to 5% for a new one. It is way easier to get current customers to expand their sort of agreement with you in one way or another. And you also get a 75% profit increase if you increase your customer retention rates by 5%. Like, that's insane, and that's such an opportunity for so many marketers, right? To deliver more ROI to the business is to not forget about these things. Selling to an existing customer, I think some folks get this, right? If you have a checking account, that's an opportunity. People, I think, naturally gravitate to having all of their stuff in one place. It makes it easier to manage, right? So, I mean, I remember, when I got my mortgage, that company then was like, oh, how about this checking account? How about this credit card? Because I know that, I'm already engaged with them. I'm already in. Let's keep this going. And retention, it's so easy to look at churn as a matter of like, oh, okay, so 80% of people stick around year over year. If you bump that up by 1% or 2%, that's so much more revenue for your company. It makes such a huge difference, even just a minor movement of percent. So anyway, that's why I think it's so important to talk about what marketing can do once people are already in your system to get more out of folks and to make for a happier customer base, because word of mouth is also nothing to sneeze at these days. Let's go to the next slide. This is just sort of another way to talk through it, right? So in terms of what automation can do, there's growing your business. There's delivering better brand experiences for customers, right? You want it to be a consistent, all these messages and all the nurturing that you're doing to be consistent with your brand identity. Different companies have very different sort of approaches to market, and you want that to sort of be the same, whether you're talking to a current customer about adding services or going out initially on the outreach. And then engaging around your offering. Onboarding, driving adoption, launching new products. These are all things that you can do through automation that will help you grow your business in one way or the other. Because that's the end goal of all of this stuff, right? Let's go to the next one. Yeah. I think that the first place to start, and it's, if you remember that funnel after the purchase, the first thing after that is onboarding, right? And so this is, I think, one of the biggest misses that a lot of companies don't focus on the onboarding, right? They've got the money, they've got your money in their pocket, and they're like, okay, we're done. It's incumbent on you to figure out how to use this product, how to make it work for you. We're done. Our role, we've already made the sell, calling it a day. And that is, I cannot can't emphasize enough how much I think that's probably the wrong mindset for most companies. Active onboarding is essential. You want to basically set expectations. You want to give people the tools to be successful with your product. That is, we talk about retention. People stick with companies that they're happy with. And if you miss the mark on onboarding, you already set the stage for somebody to exit, right? So you want to give them the tools that they need to succeed. You want that to be ideally as personalized of an experience as you can, based on, again, what you know about them through the sales process. And then you want to assess their satisfaction so you can keep improving it, right? You want to know right from the get-go how happy they are with what they're doing, because if somebody's mad at this point, it's going to be hard to recover. Once you get through that, you want to automate that and drive adoption. You can communicate over on the right-hand side. We got an example of what it looks like in our platform. If a customer, you send an email right after they get after the purchase, and they say, welcome, Here's your login details for your account. Here's some tips and tricks on how to use it. Let's say they don't open that email. What do you do? Do you hope my hope is that you don't sit and wait and be like, well, I guess, they'll figure it out when they need to. But rather than that is maybe you send another email, maybe you do some targeted outreach, maybe you have somebody reach out. You can do all of this intelligently with the right tools, right? And you don't need to. I think a lot of companies, will solve this problem by throwing more resources at it, right? Throwing more heads, throwing more people to do this outreach. But a lot of this stuff, if you know what people are doing in your platform and you can segment based on that data, then you can do all of this in a scalable way with a lot less effort. Then you want to identify the critical touch points, right? What channels do people contact you through? Is it through your chatbot? Are people emailing you? Are they going to your website and looking at the frequently asked questions page, right? And then you can individualize your engagement based on that. You want to, and I think this is really important for both. It's kind of the foundation of both Arnaud and my business, right? Which is meeting people where they are, giving them the type of communication that they're looking for, right? People, God knows, I really like customized, personalized conversations, but I don't like being called on the phone. Freaks me out. I don't know. I get anxious. I say something wrong. I love chatting with people. If there's a way to get what I want without talking to a human on the phone, I'm probably going to take it. It might not be universal, but that's a me thing, right? And so if I'm the one going to these pages, then that's the method that I want. And so being able to meet people where they are, super important. And then you want to continue scoring people, right? This is kind of what I was talking about before when I was talking about personalization, which is if people are logging into your platform, if they aren't, right? You can, scoring models aren't just for prospects. You can score people based on how engaged they are in your platform, how much they, how many times they've logged in, how much money are they keeping in your account, how much, all this stuff, right? Like you can get a really good picture of where there's opportunity for you to reach out and maybe get a larger engagement, right? So yeah, you want to keep an eye on all that stuff and continue engaging people through the entire cycle. And then if you do that, I'll go to the next slide. You keep customers excited, right? You share your roadmaps. You give them tools to educate. I think there's a few financial services companies who do an amazing job at this, where they are basically helping people learn how to use their products better. As Arnaud said, a lot of folks who are engaging with banks are low information, and if you're the one who's teaching them how to do it, they're going to stick with you. It both helps them use your products better and fosters a sense of gratitude in the long term, and it becomes this sort of virtuous cycle, right? You inform them, you train them on how to use your stuff better, and that creates a stickiness with your customers, and that helps with retention, and that keeps your growth high. And then what it creates is this other virtuous cycle, which I think is the next slide, which is the advocacy virtuous cycle. As I said before, people are doing most of their research before they even get to your website and start asking questions. So if you can identify people who are happy with your service, happy with your product, and elevate their voice, whether it's case studies or getting them to talk on social media, leave reviews, things like that, that kind of stuff attracts new customers. The first thing that I would do if I was looking to find a new bank is probably ask all of my friends what they use and whether they like it or not. If all of those people, if you've successfully onboarded everybody so that they're happy, they use your product regularly, they're logging in a lot, they feel trained up, and they feel educated on what they can do with it, they're going to be happy, and they're going to tell me that they like the service and that it's easy and simple, and that I should do it. That's going to get you more customers than almost anything else. And another thing that you can do is, you want to make it easy on people for doing that, right? You want to one of the things that we do is we kind of have a level, like a certain number of VIP customers, right? We call them our ACEs. And they, we go to them with questions. We go to them when we're asking for direct, if we want input on future product strategy. We go and talk to our Act-On, we call them Act-On custom ACEs because it's Act-On customer enthusiasts, I guess I should say. But we go to them and we ask them, how they feel about the direction. And we have a very tight relationship, and in turn, they talk to other people about us, right? They're letting people know where we're going. It's just a hugely important part of it. And all of this can be done effectively if you're keeping an eye on how people are using your product, and you're reaching out to them at the right times, and you're getting feedback consistently on how they feel about you. This becomes a lot easier to do. So, whew, all right. I think that's what I had on that side.
I think that's a great positive note to end the webinar on. I mean, we started with, maybe it's a bit hyperbolic to say this, but with the doom and gloom of dropping engagement,
but there's hope. There's hope.
There is hope. Yep.
There's so much opportunity out there. And yeah, I think that especially from like a competitive differentiation standpoint, if you're executing all of this well, I don't want to cast too much of a negative pall, but like, I've had baking experiences that were quite poor, and I've had ones that were quite good, and I am still with the ones that were good, and I'm not with the ones that were poor. And I think that in this industry in particular, this can be a huge competitive differentiator for a lot of people. Nailing this stuff down.
Absolutely. I can relate to that even from a marketer's perspective, even though obviously I, again, don't work in banking. I feel like when there's a sense of achievement you feel when you execute on all of these things well, where we've had conversions come in and people become avid users of our product with minimal interaction with any people in the buyer journey. And the sense of achievement that you feel when that happens is...
It's a self-sustaining system, instead of like, I feel, there, and don't get me wrong, there's absolutely a place for like human outreach, right? But if you can set up a system that sort of propagates itself, and is just a consistently churning and constantly optimizing system that creates engaged, happy customers, that's such a recipe for success. Fewer resources, more results. It's all you could ask for, honestly.
Absolutely. So with our slides done, I think we have about 10 minutes left in this session. If you guys have any questions for us, I was initially planning on adding some poll questions, but I didn't do that before. And Zoom's process, as it turns out, to add poll questions is a bit invested. If you guys have any questions for us, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section of the webinar or in the chat. And if you guys have to leave, that's also completely fine. If you have any questions after the fact, if you have questions that come up, maybe while you're washing the dishes and you're like, oh, I should have asked that question on the webinar, you can reach out to us through these details over here. And we'd be more than happy to continue the conversation with you guys off the webinar. But for now, drop your questions in the Q&A section, drop your questions in the chat. And if you guys don't have any questions, also completely fine. That just means that Andy and I did our job so well that you guys are as informed as you could be about this topic.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm just going to go ahead and plug one more time. We do have a big growth marketing conference coming up, for those of you who didn't hear before. On May 25th and 26th. And by the way, if you register for it, everything will be recorded and shared with you after the fact. So please, please, please go.
Just like this webinar.
What was
also
that?
I said just like this webinar, also just recorded and sent to you.
All of it will be recorded and shared with registrants after the fact. We got Rand Fishkin, Ann Hanley, Michael Brenner are going to be there. We've got customer stories. It's all concrete use cases on, how you can use marketing, or how you can use automation to improve your marketing programs. So.
Oh, this is a fun question. Could you drop a link to the pricing for both TARS and Act-On? Absolutely.
We'll grab that, share it after.
Let me see if I can find the act on pricing on the website, and then I can send it in a single.
I've already got it.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Oh, that made it go away though.
All right. The DARS pricing is in the chat, and it's in the Q&A section.
Perfect.
Great. Wow. Andy, we were so effective at our jobs.
Well, awesome.
People are like, oh, yeah, I don't have any questions about the content. I just want to get started. Give me your pricing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I hope you guys have been feeling a little inspired. It's a really exciting moment, I think, in the marketing world. And yeah, it's a good opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm going to wait for just about another, let's say, good plug. My colleague Abdulash has shared a link that you can use to book a demo with us at TARS in case you want to talk this stuff through. The way I like to think about our demos is they're personalized webinars, touching on the themes that we talked about today, where one of our chatbot experts gives you essentially a personalized walkthrough about some of the concepts that we talked about today, and how you can actually implement them for your business. I'm going to wait for another maybe 30 seconds here. And if not, I'm going to close out this webinar. I'm going to do it really slowly though. So if anyone has any last minute questions, they can type them into the Q&A section. But if people don't, I am going to end this webinar. Thank you guys for joining. It was an absolute pleasure hosting this webinar for you guys. And thank you, Andy, for jumping on this webinar with us, because I think the information you shared was
all day. I love it.
Yep. Yeah, webinars are some of the most rewarding pieces of content that you can put out there, because like a blog, you write it, you put it out there. People might read it, but you don't get to engage with them in a way that you can in webinars. But it was super informative. I mean, I'm going to incorporate some of the stuff that you talked about further down in the funnel in our workflows at TARS.
Awesome.
All right. On that note, I'm going to end this webinar. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, guys.